Okay, my name is Harold Simpson, spelled Haroldsimpson, and I started on the railroad in January 1966 in the shop as a helper, and we done the relief work for the train crew as a brakeman, conductor, and that was my job, maintenance on the locomotives and doing the relief work, drying sand, wiping grease, whatever. And I say drying sand, locomotives, they had bins in them where you put sand, dry sand. And if the track got slick and started spinning the wheels, they'd blow sand on the track for traction. In the wintertime, we went through lots of sand. I used to call it cooking sand, but it was actually just drying sand. We had an old tin building there with an old pot-bellied stove, and it had a grate out around it with slots in it. And our sand was delivered by dump truck just outside, and I would shovel that wet sand in between the grates and the pot-bellied stove, and it was an old coal stove, and you get just pretty red hot. Well, the heated and the slots in them grates, as the sand dried, would run out the bottom. Then I had to shovel it through a screen bin, into a bin through a screen to get all the little rocks and stuff out of it. And then we put it in the locomotive. It was a bucket brigade. You shoveled out of the bin by buckets and went up and dumped them in the bins on the locomotive. And that was just one of my jobs, starting out. And the brakeman work was more critical or more crucial. They had to have a couple of relief men for the train crew. There was 5 men on the train crew. You had an engineer, a conductor, 2 brakemen, and engineer, fireman, conductor, and 2 brakemen. And back when I started, we used lanterns. They didn't have radios. This was my lantern issued to me in '66 when I started. And anyway, we always worked at night while the mills were down, so you had to have a lantern, and you also used them for signals. For like the locomotive, if you was back on the train and you wanted the locomotive to go forward, it was an up and down signal. You wanted to back up, it was a big circle signal. Well, at night, all they could see is your light going. If you wanted to stop, it was like that. And you packed your lantern all the time out there on train work. And but anyway, that was one part of it. And when I started the roundhouse down there, I call it round, it was the locomotive shed, the big building, had a dirt floor, a concrete foundation and a tin building, but with just a dirt floor with a concrete pad around each pit so you could get underneath the locomotives. And we had a big old pot-bellied stove in there they burnt wood in. You could throw a whole tie in there at a time and burn it. And when we first got to work, that's the first thing we done in the wintertime. And we go out there I call it the roundhouse. We go out there and we'd stoke that fire up to warm up that big monster building where the locomotives were. And then we'd have to go out with a little hand cart and haul in big old pieces of tie or wood or whatever they got. They bought wood, they used old ties, they burned anything in there. Yeah, I saw a lot of changes in the railroad in my 34 and a half years there. We started out, the mills were going great guns, and we was hauling mostly lumber out of here, and we was hauling as high as 25, 30 loads every day out of here, 5 days a week. And then what they do, they get all the loads loaded up and haul them to the Prineville Junction and bring back empties for the next day's work. And it was pretty much all lumber. There was very little other went out at that time. And then as time went on, they made them quit using the wigwam burners, what the mills used to burn trash with and stuff and their waste. Well, they had a lot of material get it, so they were putting in chippers to send to the paper mills. It was easier and cheaper for them, I think, just to burn that stuff, to the cost of a chipper and all that, but they switched over to that when they made them do away with the wigwam burners, and all the mills put in chippers, the ones that didn't have them by then. And when I started, your box cars or locomotives all had friction bearings on the wheels. And most people don't know what that is, but it was just a half a bearing. You had the box with just like yarn, I'll just call it yarn, it's called waste. Underneath you filled it full of oil. And as the axle rolled around, it rolled up under the bearing. It was just a half a bearing that sit on top of the axle. And that's where you used to get your hot boxes and stuff in the olden days. And I seen that all change, all put everything with it just in a few years was all roller bearings. It was so much, and eliminated the hot box problem. In the early to mid 80s, we started hauling in Schwab's tires and truck tires on what's called piggyback, where the truck trailers were put on a flat car, and then we bring them in, and then we started, after they unload them, instead of sending them out empty, they started sending them to the mills, and they'd load them with lumber. Then we'd put them back on these flat cars and send them out. And we started that in the 80s, and we started that, and I said, well, who's going to run that? And he says, you are. And so we added the piggyback service, which lasted a few years, and then the BN, we was creating problems with them because they were furnishing the box cars down here. And so they started selling them to the mills way cheaper than we could, so we went out of that business. We started a dinner train that hauled passengers, and they served dinners on it. And we run them on weekends, sometimes in an evening or on the weekend when the regular train wasn't running. And this is after business slowed down and the regular train crew wasn't out there most of the time. And we done that, then we do it on weekends. And I'd either be an engineer or conductor or a brakeman on it, and then we pull them back and forth. Like I say, that was extra work. And we did what they call railroad days off and on for a few years, and they give free rides to the kids or people that wanted to take a ride on the caboose. And we start at the depot and load it up and haul them out to Pine Products, and then come back into town. And that was one of my more memorable times with the little kids, because we'd get them on there, and I'd tell them, I started asking the smaller ones, I said, what would you do if train robbers come on here? And I'd act like I was real tough. I say, boy, if they come on here, I'd punch them in the nose, and I'd box their ears, and all this. Well, then we get out to Pine Products, and we had a group, Keith Reynolds and some other guys that had horses. They'd come right down there shooting their guns and rob the train. Well, so when they come down shooting their guns and stuff, or kind of a coat closet in the caboose where you could hang your rain gear and stuff, I'd act like I was real scared when they come down there, and I'd tell them little kids, don't tell them where I'm at, and I'd get in there and shut the door. And them little kids, the first thing when them robbers come in there, that's the first thing they tell them, he's in there, they tell me every time. That was a lot of fun. That was doing that, and then we had signals at that time, and of course I knew exactly where the train would be when you got close enough to turn the signals on. And we had to push backwards back into town, so I'd ride on the back of the caboose and with the radio, for watching crossing protection and stuff. And I'd stand there in the doorway and I said, little kids, well, we need to turn them signals on to, so the cars don't hit the train when we go across the crossing. I said, how are we going to do that from back here? And I said, well, I know. I'll just snap my magic fingers. I'd wet my finger, and when we got right to the point where the lights come on, for the first start down, I'd snap my fingers and they'd come on. They'd look at me, little kids would look at me. Just stuff like that. I had a lot of fun with the older kids. The little bigger kids got kind of a pain, the small ones were a blast. And I really enjoyed doing that. And as time went on, my business went downhill real bad. Truckers were getting most of the railroad business, and so the size of the crews were going down, and things were changing. Excuse me. Things were changing, and there was less lumber going out, so there's less people, and we wasn't running near as often. And there was about 20 people working on the railroad when I started. When I left, I think there was about 6 that was running the railroad. And you had to do a little bit of everything. That's just the way it was. On a small railroad like this, you had to be able to do a little bit of everything. And from doing the train crew to mechanicing to working on the track to working on the machinery, taking care of the crossing signals. And the crossing signals were a real pain. When we got them, it was the same thing as the piggyback service. I got them. I said, well, who's going to take them? I didn't know a thing about signal. And they said, well, they're yours. And I said, yeah, what am I supposed to do? He says, they're yours. You'll figure it out. I did the best I could. I never did get good at them, but I was up in the middle of the night going out there shutting them off. The police would call me. We got a signal down. There ain't no train around. And I was out of bed, and back there for a few years, it got to where if the phone rang in the middle of the night, when I jumped out of bed, I had my pants in my hand and on before my feet hit the floor. I knew I was heading out in the country. Either locomotives had quit on them, or the signals were something wrong with the signals. And but anyway, it was a good time. The railroad was good to me. It was a lot of hard work, a lot of heavy work, everything big and heavy. And when I got where I could retire, I went ahead and took it. Cause I wasn't getting any younger and any stronger. And like I say, nothing was getting any lighter or any easier on the railroad. So, and along in the 80s, I believe it was, the mills started having trouble, the spotted owl and the different things, and the Forest Service started selling less and less timber, and there wasn't enough timber for the mills to all operate. And one by one, they went down until they were all gone, and that was a big impact on the railroad. And to diversify for that, they put in a reload center and transfer station out by Pine Rock, bought land out there and put in sheds and stuff, and now that's mainly where they start from, is out there. But trying to get businesses, different businesses, anything to keep the railroad going. And I'm not up to date on the last few years, but it was a big impact because that's mainly what the railroad hauled was timber, wood products. And when they started going out, well, that really put an impact on the railroad. And like I said, there was only about 6 of us left on the railroad that was trying to run the railroad. And they get this grant money from the federal government for these projects to try to keep it going. And rebuild track, put in heavier track, and whatever we needed to function with. But it probably lost out. And now they're hauling. Les Schwab was a big factor, hauling Les Schwab's tires in. He was still is one of the steady customers that bringing the tires in. And he doesn't haul anything out, but he brings many loads of tires, boxcar loads of tires in that we haul. And but that's got down to where that's about it. And then out at Pine Products, a trust company went in. Seemed like we had several companies start, but they didn't make a go of it. They might get started, do pretty good for just a little bit, and then they'd was down to nothing or they'd go out of business. And there for last few years I was there, we get our hopes up, yeah, this company's going in, and then it wouldn't work out near as good as what they was hoping. And so business kept going downhill, but I understand now they are hauling more loads than we did for quite a few years there. They're hauling for the last several years. They're getting more loads now. And the economy is, well, things are doing good, but not on the railroads business. It's doing fair, but it'll never be like it was when all the mills, all the sawmills were going and the molding plants, and we was putting all the business down to, went from that to putting her nothing. So it was quite a change.
Okay.
This is a kerosene brakeman lantern, and they was given to me retirement. It's got my name and inscription on it, my years on the railroad. And this was a retirement from the railroad. Then also, I got the watch and pocket knife with the key bob on it. And most of the retirees got watches with locomotives on it. And I'd worked on locomotives from the time I started there, and I said, I don't want no locomotive on my watch. And I kind of wish I did now, but at the time I didn't want it. I was tired of locomotives. And this was my engineer's license and my shop card from when I was down there on the. Everybody had to have an engineer's license and be qualified. You give you a test every year to keep you qualified as a locomotive engineer. And that was some of the stuff that you had on the railroad. That was, yeah. I saw 6 managers in my time. C.C. McGlynn was here when I started, and Jerry Price was the manager when I left. And Jerry Price was the 6th one through my stint, the managers I saw. I became a shop foreman after 13 years. Like I said, I started out wiping grease, and then my boss left 13 years and was kind of like the other 2 instances. I said, well, who's going to take over the shop? I'm just a helper. He said, it's yours. And so I became a shop foreman. Either learn it or leave. So you just buckled in and learned, done the best you could. And I learned a lot. I learned a lot about locomotives over the telephone. They say most railroad problems are solved over the phone. You call another railroad or mechanical shop at another railroad, hey, I got this problem. The locomotive won't do this or won't do that or something. And somewhere down the line, there's somebody's run into this problem and know what the answer, you know what to do to solve it. So a lot of problems were solved over the phone. And I was on the phone a lot after I become the shop foreman. And but anyway, that was a great help to be able to call somebody like, and everybody I called were never too busy to help you the best they could. That was great.